So the big issue this year is going to be the state budget. And in December, the governor released her budget, and it was a big wake-up call, I think, for folks in terms of some of the decisions we'll be making. In the governor's budget, she proposed cuts in really nearly every functional area of state government. If you care about K through 12, which I do, you saw elimination of funding for the class size initiative, suspension of the initiative that provides cost of living adjustment to teachers, elimination of funding for class sizes from kindergarten through 4th grade. If you care about higher education, I used to chair the higher education committee, you saw substantial cuts to each of the colleges and universities in our state, elimination of some of the financial aid programs, and on top of that, a significant increase in tuition. If you care about social services, you saw the elimination of some of the programs that provide health coverage to Washington citizens, literally taking tens of thousands of Washingtonians off of health care. The State History Museum was proposed to be closed. Francis Haddon Morgan Center, which is in our district, which provides services for people with autism, was proposed to be closed. It reads like a full list of the impacts of this Great Recession. So the question we have is, so what happens next? And what happens next is the legislature will be engaging on this budget. And over the course of the 105 days that we're here, trying to craft a budget that hopefully upholds our values and does right by Washington citizens. For me, I've got a few principles that I'm hoping will sort of direct how we approach this budget. First, I think there are some core priorities that need to be reflected in the budget. To me, there are some essentials that need to be done, and there's some non-essentials that should be cut. The state simply can't afford to do everything. In terms of the essentials, there's things like education. It's in our Constitution as the state's paramount duty. It's also the smartest investment we make. The dollars that we invest in educating our kids are dollars we save in prisons and unemployment down the road. Second, I think it's important to have a basic safety net for people who are truly vulnerable. I spend a lot of time and effort working on behalf of people who have disabilities or who are elderly, and I think we have a moral obligation to advocate for those folks. And then finally, we need to preserve public safety. A lot of states that have gone through these budget discussions, I think, have turned the dial too much on letting people out of prison, and that's not a direction that I'd like to see our state go. So part of it's really laying out the essentials and the non-essentials, and inevitably we will see some very difficult cuts, even in areas where we feel that are strong values. Second, I would like to see our state really pursue a fair amount of reforms to do things more efficiently and effectively. It's important not just to write a budget for the next 2 years, but to look at things that set the state up for the next 20 years. I've particularly been working in this arena in higher ed, looking at ways we can make the higher education system function more effectively and more efficiently, and I'll have a few bills this session in that vein. Finally, the best thing that we can do, not just to help families in our neck of the woods, but also to solve the state budget problem, is we got to get people back to work. I mean, part of the challenges that the state faces on the budget is driven by reductions in revenues since the economy's in the tank. And when people are out of work, there's greater demand for state services. So we've got to get folks back to work. You're going to see a pretty broad agenda on that front. Some efforts to improve the business climate. I think you're going to see a robust conversation around workers' compensation and unemployment insurance. A continued focus on workforce development, making sure that we're preparing workers for the jobs now and into the future. And finally, I've got a few bills that I'm working on in the area of infrastructure to make sure that we're providing support for those private investments, that we have the things like the roads and the sewers and things like that to support that private development, which right now is sometimes inhibiting that investment from going forward. I guess the final thing I'll say about the budget is this. I think it's very important for us to remember that we are all in this together. The state is not unique in the challenges that it faces. Every family, every business is grappling with this economy as well. And I think it's important for us as legislators to remember that. In fact, I just sponsored a bill that would have elected officials, including legislators, take a reduction in salary. So as other people are impacted by these budget cuts, I think it's only appropriate that elected officials get impacted as well. We are all in this together, and it's what sets us apart, that we, as a society, we as Washingtonians care about each other, and it means there are things that the state simply won't be doing going forward, where we're going to have the back of our neighbors and fellow folks in our community. So that's what's ahead for this legislative session. That's going to be priority one, is figuring out how to do our duty to balance the budget, but do so in a way that hopefully upholds those principles. And I imagine in our conversations down the road, we'll be talking about some of those other priorities and going into specifics on each of those areas that we just discussed.